Welcome to another episode of Municipal Focus. My name is Kevin Tachi, and I will be your host for this segment. What we do with this segment is just provide you information about things that happen on your local government level, even upwards to county and state levels. Today, we're here to talk a little bit about budgets, knowing that both Whitman and Hants are on the cusp of their respective town meetings. We've already had conversations with Town Administrator Lisa Green and Town Administrator Lincoln Heineman. So the thought is to have a conversation with the administration and also the school committee to talk about the budget that was put together on the educational level. And I want to make sure also, as we preface any further comments, that inviting Mr. Jeff Szymaniak and Mr. Chris Howard is to kind of talk about the process and not their respective opinions on how the process goes forward. Again, it's just basically an informational piece to share with everybody so people will get a better understanding. Will it change from year to year? It always does. But right now, we're worried about the fiscal 2023 budget. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Morning.
Morning.
So we'll start things off. What typically happens when the budget process starts? Are we talking this is something that starts in February, March, or is this something that starts just as the school year is starting to get up and running in like October and November? I'll throw that one to you, Jeff.
So a little bit of both. The meat and potatoes is in February once it's presented, and the work of explaining where we got to and trying to get the members of both communities to understand what I'm looking for, what the school district's looking for, is in February. But I'll be honest, this year we started in June once we closed. The school committee prioritized 3 items to help me in my goals and what their goals were, and some of those items had financial impacts. So as we developed what 3 priorities we were going to look at for the start of the school year, the 3 priorities were full day K, a universal one-to-one initiative for all our students as far as technology, and a robust related arts program K to 8 with a specific focus on 6 through 8 middle school. We were able to really put into this budget 2 of those initiatives, which is full day K or tuition-free full day K, I should say, and a universal one-to-one initiative. So that process started really in June, giving me a framework of where we were at and where we want to be. The other thing that is financially focused, or what I look at, is our strategic plan. It's a 5-year strategic plan. So I want to make sure I hit the benchmarks in that strategic plan as far as curriculum, as far as student support, is social emotional learning for our students, and safety. So everything kind of gets built into that February presentation, making sure that we are hitting our targets for our students, making sure that we are retaining our staff members, and putting forth something to move us forward. In Whitman Hanson in the past, we've always looked to stay level service or just a little bit of moving forward. I think we are still there, but I think this year in this budget, because we've been diligent in what we do, we're taking a huge step forward with the initiatives that we set forth in the summer. The other thing we did this year, we had a budget subcommittee of school committee members and my business manager, John Stanbrook, and myself, and members from town who actually came in as a public meeting to offer some opinion and really do a deep dive into our budget, not only fiscal 23, but looking through the next 5 years. So that's helped us in our process this year, which was something different, something that I hadn't done as a superintendent, something that we haven't done since I've been a principal here in 2010.
So I would ask you, Chris, is the proactive approach, was this something that was embraced by the committee, is just to, do it a little earlier and try to get ahead of the curve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the will of the committee and what we talked about, as Jeff said, they wanted to get together over the summer. We spent a lot of time, right? That is a volunteer committee, and Certainly Jeff and John and others, George, are taking their time, but you also have a number of volunteers that are taking some beautiful days in the summer that are getting together to talk about, hopefully helping move the school district forward. But those meetings were helpful, and we did spend a lot of time kind of doing some initial brainstorming with the administration, getting their thoughts, making sure that feedback was shared with the leadership team, right? Because you have school committee members who also have wonderful intentions, but at the same time, we're not educators. That's not what we do. We're not the leaders of the district. So I thought there was really good collaboration. There's a really good amount of information sharing. And that translated into, as Jeff said, key components that were then articulated into goals and worked into the budget. Going forward, as part of that, this is all, again, stuff that we've already agreed to. Jeff talked about the budget subcommittee, and part of that work, and I won't get too deep because I don't know if you want to get into this later, is really to look ahead and really start to build a 5-year plan, look at what's in it. Again, we kind of know what we're going to get for state aid. And those are, again, public informational meetings that we'll be having that we've already agreed to have. But knowing what you're going to get from state aid and knowing kind of what you need to operate the district, it really does start to paint a picture that really will change the budget process so that there is a lot more information being shared publicly, transparently. As Jeff said, that budget subcommittee and the school committee, you can go on the website. We've shared everything. I think the budget presentation, I don't know, Jeff, there is probably hundreds of pages of documents.
Yes.
Every budget subcommittee, we're doing the same. So that, I think it has been a positive step in the right direction in terms of getting information out to the public, hearing the public, and trying to create a better understanding of where we're going and, more importantly, why we're trying to get there.
Would you say, Chris, that the transparency is paramount in this process?
It is. Because I think, look, I've been around this a little bit now, and I think intentions are always good. Yeah. But it's important, again, to take the time, and it's hard work, and it's time and energy, but you got to share what it is you're doing, and you got to share kind of the fundamental pieces, whether it's the actual numbers, documents, et cetera. So yes, I think that's really important.
So Jeff, I would ask you, is the budget process, is it a tiered approach? Do you begin with a foundation and then you add in other financial components?
So yes, the foundation is my staff. I think the biggest portion of my budget are people. So we have to assess, where we are salary wise, where we are contractual wise. And this year was a bargaining year. So you're taking some guesses onto where you might be with the Teachers Association. So the building blocks are there. And we already know as well what we're going to get from state aid. We can make a judgment. We're going to get for the next umpteen years probably $100,000 to $150,000 in additional state aid. Everything else is town-based. So that's where we start. We start with that framework, and then we start to push in programs or personnel that we think are going to be essential in the upcoming school year. I will tell you, and you mentioned COVID. COVID has thrown a huge wrinkle in this because we're still trying to assess where our students are at. This year was supposed to be a normal year. It started out, for our students, the time in school, absolutely. They were in full school day, but they were masked. You still weren't able to assess where they were at within their own social, emotional learning space. And we've had to do some interventions for that in their learning and also their behavior, because I think many students forgot how to do school. And for some students, I look at a second grade student in COVID has never had a traditional school year. So we did a lot of early education in September. So really around the budget process, trying to assess where we were at. And then we did have some federal money this year called ESSER money. That was really is intentionally there to put interventions and policies and plans in place for our students as far as COVID recovery. That was a wrinkle that we've never had. We've never had additional federal funds that we could access. The challenge with that federal funds, and I say it's a blessing and a curse, they want you to use it for faculty and staff, but it's one-time money that's going to go away. So if you build it in, you need to be able to sustain it and make sure that you're not pulling those people away or those programs away in 3 years when federal dollars run out. The other area that was challenging coming back this year and for FY23-24 is special education. our numbers have increased due to the fact that certain students weren't serviced either in district or out of district due to COVID restrictions. So we've done our best internally, and now some students have gravitated to needing additional assistance out of district, and we're waiting for those placements to come about. But those cost money, and we don't know who those students are yet. So that was another challenge that was not like the budget cycle that I did in fiscal 19 or fiscal 20. COVID was different, and I say, in full honesty, the COVID ESSER money has been outstanding, but trying to plan around it and make sure that we utilize it in the best possible way that we can sustain it as a district has been extremely challenging, because the Fed throws in different wrinkles and rules after they distribute the funds. So that was a challenge, but it's based around staffing and our needs for the following year.
Is it possible that the ESSER money could just one day evaporate without warning? Is that something that you're monitoring, or is that something that's always going to be there?
No, it's going to evaporate by fiscal 25.
Okay.
So we know there's a hard dead end date of September 30th, 2024. I have to have exhausted my funds. But the rules put in place, the rules came out in June of 2021 after they gave us our allotment in March of 2021. So when we planned the FY22 budget, we said, hey, this is great, because they had 3 cycles of ESSER, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. And ESSER 1 and 2 really they had some rules and some restrictions, but it was really wide open. ESSER 3, we thought was the same. And I'm not saying the rules are undoable or extreme, but the rules came out after the funds were distributed and after all our budgets were passed. So you had to make some changes on the fly. And for some folks in town, they're like, hey, the school district got this large sum of money. Why can't they just throw it in? And there are rules around it for summer programs, for at-risk kids, for social emotional learning. They just put those stipulations in at the end of June, which kind of threw a monkey wrench in it. We are using those funds, I think, appropriately in FY23 and FY24 with the goal, again, with the budget subcommittee and the school committee in mind, to make sure what we use for staffing is sustainable, and we continuously look at it to make sure that we're using people and our program as efficiently as possible.
Chris, one of the respective towns brought into the process, and there's a discussion about their annual assessment and how they can contribute to the fiscal year that's ahead.
Yeah. So the way the process works, and one of the things that does make it a challenge, it's an appropriate challenge, right? Because we are a public body, is, we can certainly give Jeff feedback as a committee on goals and things of the like. But we don't get to see the budget really in advance of everyone else. We get so we have the early February public budget hearing, and we get the packet maybe a few days in advance of that. But there isn't an ongoing dialogue between school committee and the superintendent on, hey, this is what we think about the budget. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this before it's presented publicly. It just can't happen, right? That's right. Open meeting, right? And so really early February is when we have the public budget hearing, and that's when it's laid out. And it's laid out for the public, but it's also laid out for the school committee. And at that time, obviously, we encourage every stakeholder, public as well as municipal representatives, whether it's the selectmen, the finance committees, other folks, to attend, as well as the public. So that's how we've done the process up to this point, and then we kind of work from there. One of the things, while it was a little bumpy, I think, with some of the conversations, I believe it was helpful, was we did get a lot of feedback this year about maybe rethinking that process. So I think all of those groups had the takeaway of really rethinking how we do that process to make sure that all the stakeholders can participate and have an understanding. As Jeff alluded to, there are some time constraints, right? We can certainly do a lot of things, but we are also beholden to the state to give us our budget figures as well. So, there's a lot we can do and assume, but at the same time, we are waiting for some other folks. So that's the way the process up to this point really kicks off in February. We have a set of meetings usually in February and March, and then the assessments are sent to the towns. I think going forward, because this came out, again, this was all public discussion, that I think there is going to be an opportunity to revisit that and maybe think about how we do that, whether that's joint meetings or we just kind of rework the public meeting that we had. I think that's a work in progress. And the complexity of that is, we have a Hanson Board of Selectmen, a Whitman Board of Selectmen, a Whitman Finance Committee, a Hanson Finance Committee. And so we got to try and find something that really works for everyone. So that's really one of the takeaways that came out of this year's process in terms of, how do we do that? How do we share that? Certainly, if we can share the 5-year plan publicly, or budget rather, that starts to give folks an opportunity to maybe have a better understanding going forward. So that's kind of where we're at and what we've, again, agreed to do going forward. So it's always going to be a work in progress, Kevin. I think the budget is one of those things like everything else. Things evolve, things happen. You got to listen to folks and see how, again, you can evolve and continue to make it an effective process.
A couple of years ago, it was discovered that there was an issue regarding the method that the towns contributed to the district. I don't know if it was alternative or per pupil versus statutory. To date, has that been solved, or is it still a work in progress, Chris?
Yeah, so that's one that I'll tread a little lightly because I can't speak on behalf of both towns, nor would I even be able to if I wanted to, because I think there's a lot of, it depends who you talk to. So I think from an agreement standpoint, there was a amendment that was agreed to by both towns that moved the methodology. I think, again, one of the public comments that we've heard repeatedly through a variety of meetings is, again, looking at the regional agreement. We still technically have a regional agreement that is about 30 years old.
1991.
Yep, 31. So it does need to be reworked. I think, again, what we said in our last school committee meeting, and again, we had public officials that kind of commented the same, was there really is an opportunity to look at that. So I think we're what we said is we're planning on teeing that up after the election cycle in terms of the regional agreement committee, and then seeing, again, how folks want to get together to move that forward. But it really is a tri-party agreement, so to speak. You have the school district that is the execution body of actually, effectuating the agreement, but then you have the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson. So it really does require all three of those parties to kind of come together and reach some basis of agreement in terms of how those things move forward.
Would you say, so where do we stand as far as the assessment for each community? What are each providing for the annual assessment? And is it going to be sufficient, at least for fiscal 23?
So we've submitted ours. So a couple of things. We have to submit an initial assessment 45 days prior to town meeting. So the school committee voted an assessment in March. The school committee, and through some hard work of my business manager, the budget subcommittee, and actually some members of our community, we were able to look at an area as far as transportation that we were able to adjust our assessment, both the operational assessment and the non-mandated busing assessment, and lower that at our April 13th meeting. I think much to the pleasure of both communities and doing what was right. We put a lot of work into looking at alternatives and trying to look at ways to be as fiscally structured and efficient as possible. And we were able to come up with another methodology outside of statutory or agreement. This was around non-mandated busing and per pupil. And we actually came up with a mileage assessment now on non-mandated busing, which was able to help both our communities in their operational assessment and their non-mandated assessment. So the school committee actually lowered the operational assessment and non-mandated assessments to both communities in April. And for fiscal 23, I think we're in a very, very, very good place for town meeting and for the school budget.
I'm going to ask you the $64 question, Jeff, and that is this, how difficult is it to assemble a budget? You're trying to be mindful of the fiscal constraints. You're also trying to look to add depth. Again, you're talking about a strategic plan, and I'm sure in that plan, you're trying to add classes and programs for the betterment of your students as they're graduating out of the K through 12. What is that like?
It's difficult. I mean, when I took over in 18, we kind of had a strategic plan that the former superintendent put together. So the goal of my leadership team was to check the boxes off on that and make sure we were able to finish that plan. Last year, over the past couple of years, I think in January of 21, we passed our new 5-year plan. So we're constantly looking at improvement, especially in the academic area. And I'm not going to, again, throw out COVID, but we've had the wrinkle of social emotional as well, and making sure our kids are all okay as they progress academically, K to 22. And when I say K to 22, we have a post-grad program for our students 18 to 22 who are special education. We've actually added to that program this year because we have more students in our post-grad program. And in the FY23 budget, I'm actually adding a teacher for that to make sure all of our students, and I want to say K, now I want to throw in pre-K because we have 130 kids in our preschool program, half of which are special education. So we are continuously looking at ways to improve, which don't put a drain on both towns and aren't necessarily long-term. ESSER 3 money has been looked at for short-term. And I think this year, and as I told the school committee, this has been a difficult year to plan because we still are trying to assess where our students are at. We have a baseline. We have a baseline from 1920 in March of 2020 when the kids went out. They came back for a hybrid year last year. They've done this year. And now we're trying to get a real baseline with our trimester assessments in ELA and math, which we do on our own, K to 5, to see where our students are at and what we need to do to improve it. Through our budget process over the past couple of years, we've made some huge gains in curriculum. We've added a math and science or math and ELA curriculum in the elementary schools. We've added adjustment counselors in every building. So we have the bones. Now we're going to start to add on more muscle as we go forward in the next 5 years. And again, working with the subcommittee to say, what's our 5-year plan? What are we looking at? And what can the towns afford over the next 5 years?
So I would ask you, Chris, what is the collective body's feeling in regards to what the superintendent has been able to accomplish of those goals set for, whether it's the pre-K, free pre-K, the 1-to-1, what have you been hearing the consensus as to this particular budget that's being put forth for a vote come May 2nd?
Yeah. So again, I think a couple things. So one, we obviously approved the budget by the required vote. So that's the biggest indicator. Yep. And then the second piece is not to jump the gun, because we do have a evaluation process, and that evaluation process is actually kicking off over the next about 45 days. So Jeff's literally in the process of putting together his self-evaluation. And then for folks that don't know, what we do is we'll look at that. And then all the committee members, I think, I'm doing it off the top of my head, Jeff, so you can be honest, I think it was around June 1st.
Yes.
The committee then will submit all their evaluations, and we'll talk about that. And the beauty of that is, for folks that are interested, they can listen in on the meeting, and those evaluations can be made available public if anyone wants to do them. So there is a completely formal process that we follow in terms of evaluating the superintendent. Obviously, his goals are a big part of that. So that's kind of in process. So I haven't done mine. I know other folks probably haven't finished theirs. Jeff's working on his self-evaluation. That's more to come. So thank you for teasing that. Maybe we'll have some folks that want to watch that process.
And Kevin, if I can add just a little bit, outside the budget too, of the operating budget, we also have to put together a capital budget for both communities, which entails a lot of work through facilities and again through our business office, looking at the exterior, the buildings and the exteriors, and something that I'm not an expert at is playgrounds. And playgrounds came up huge this year. And we have warrant articles in the town of Whitman for our playgrounds, which are extremely expensive. And again, keeping in mind, trying to do things for the communities, it's not just the interior of the building or the people that we educate. What we have to look at, and it's not in our budget, but it has an effect on the towns, is our buildings and grounds and the accessibility and the safety of our buildings and grounds. So it's another piece of the budget process that kind of it's not the be all end all of our conversations. We have a facility subcommittee And we work really well with our facilities department, our technology department, to look at the nuts and bolts of the district as well as just the people and our students. And that's another responsibility that we have. And it's also an impact financially to the communities that you don't necessarily see in the budget, in the operational budget. They're capital warrants, they're capital projects. And when the towns have money to fix things, it's outstanding. If they don't, it's a back and forth to see where we prioritize our needs.
So we're winding down here in our time and talking. I want to thank both of you for joining me for this conversation. This is an opportunity for each of you to maybe address a question that it's a fact, it's a frequently asked question that if you have an opportunity to have it as part of this program, you can at least once and for all, at least put out there and refer to it if somebody asks you. Jeff, I'll start with you.
I'm not sure what you're looking for right now.
Just is there a question that you're always asked by a member of the community that you seem that you're always answering, that if that maybe it's going to get out to a greater audience if you're able to at least mention it here?
That would took me a little, Kevin.
Okay.
To be honest, I mean the folks in our community, what I've seen, and I'm just going to use experience. Our community is changing. I think people want us, and they want to see my leadership team, myself, and our school committee try to put together the best district that we possibly can. And finances have always been at the cusp of that. And I think now we are in a better place conversationally and transparently with our community so that they know where our money is going and they actually see what we spend it on. And then moving forward, I hope to continue that and put things in that will service all of our kids. We do have a different community than we did 10 years ago when I got here. It's more diversified. The property values have gone up. People want to see more, and they want to see how our students graduate. And our goal has always been giving students options at graduation, whether it be post-secondary college, whether it be the military or career training. That's an area we need to focus in on, is more skill-based and more opportunities for our students who aren't necessarily college-bound. And we have seen that in our society. We need people who work in the trades, and that's not something that Whitman-Hanson, we focus really in on college preparatory. I think we are transitioning a little bit into skill-based, and that starts at the elementary and middle school level all the way through to the high school. So I think that's what people just want to see. They want to see us moving forward.
Chris, is there a question that is always put to your committee that if you have a moment to at least talk to?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a general understanding of the finances, right? I think, and this is right what we're working on in the budget subcommittee presently. So just like the understanding of, hey, this is a lot of money. This is a big expense on the town. Why, right? And I think trying to build that understanding is what's really important. I mean, we've touched on it a few times here today, but really the understanding of, the school district isn't really very different than a municipality, and it isn't really different than a private business or a public business, right? Every year there are costs, and every year those costs tend to go up. I mean, Jeff alluded to it. We've talked about it. We definitely want to work smarter, right? And find ways to reallocate existing expenses as things change, and maybe use that to help us go deeper into different programs and offer different things. But at the end of the day, having been around, again, a number of nonprofit, for-profit entities, I think we can all acknowledge expenses go up. And so as those expenses go up, it's really the understanding of, well, what does that look like, right? And so it gets really complicated as a regional school district because we spend a lot of time, even as you ask the questions that we often get, on the assessments and the increases for the assessments. But the step before that is really looking at our overall budget and looking at the increases to the budget, which then translates to an assessment. And so trying to get the focus back to the budget and an understanding of what is that, what does it look like, and why is it changing is really important. And so, again, we talked about this publicly, a 3% budget increase to the school district, that probably isn't really out of line with what the towns are doing if you took the schools out, right? So it has to kind of translate and think about that. I think oftentimes, and again, this is something we're working on. It's a question that we've heard as a committee, is that lack of understanding sometimes of what does that mean and how does that translate, right? And how does that then translate to the assessment? And then, well, my goodness, look at how much we're spending on education compared to this, that, or the other thing. Again, I think it's oftentimes, I think we can help with that understanding, because when you look at it, you take a step back and look at it objectively, it really does tend to line up with kind of what you just see in life as general. I mean, I think we all, if you pull out bills from 10 years ago, probably aren't a lot of them that that you're actually paying less now. So it's really kind of building that understanding. That's something that we're undertaking within the budget subcommittee with the school committee, trying to build that understanding. Because I think if people see that, it's intuitive, right? Like I said, I don't think a lot of us say, hey, 5 years later, I should be spending a lot less on my whatever, fill in the blank, than I am now. So I think that's a question we get a lot, and something that we can certainly work towards helping to bridge the understanding.
As we wrap up here, is there anything that I haven't asked but you feel that we should take a moment to mention, or do you feel confident that we're going into the respective town meetings on the right foot?
I think we're going on the right foot. I think this year's process has been, I will say, exhausting at points, because we met a lot, and in a great way. It's all been public. We've had members of the public at all of our subcommittee meetings, and they've had input, and we've taken feedback. So I think it's been a long process, but it's been a valid process, and I'm feeling very good about going on Monday where we're at. And I would encourage people who are listening here to get involved and look at our documents. And if you have a question, get in touch with Chris or myself. Show up to a subcommittee meeting or a school committee meeting and have your voice heard. We have public comment. We've opened up a lot to our towns for people to give some input, and I think it's there, and we're just looking for that input. Chris, anything in closing?
Yeah, just building on that, I think we're definitely on the right foot. The beautiful part of town meeting is it's, as a lot of people say, it's one of the purest forms of democracy, right? We all get in a building together and we talk about things and decisions are made. So hopefully folks attend those. Those are our towns, whether you're in Whitman or Hanson, and they're an important part of that process. And we move forward based upon that. And as Jeff said, absolutely, if folks are listening, we got Jeff, myself, we got 9 other members. If you have thoughts, you have ideas, I agree. It has been challenging at times this year, but it's been good, because I do think that has helped build the process going forward. So folks, definitely reach out to your school committee members. Feel free to reach out to either of us. If there's things that we can look at doing better, or there's things people simply don't understand, we welcome that dialogue.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me for this conversation. I feel conversations like this, public or even as a roundtable, are valuable information, valuable tools for the community to better understand how things work, especially when it comes to funding a municipality, whether it's for a new DBW building or for an education. It's very important. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Kevin, for having us.
You got it. And I want to thank you, the folks who tune in to programs like this. Until our next conversation, have a great day.